Hello and welcome to Azure Local Tech Talk. It's a pleasure to be here with you today, and it's a pleasure to have a special guest we have here for the first time. And I bring on stage Jake. Jake Walsh is a solution architect and Microsoft MVP. And Jake, welcome to the show. And maybe you introduce yourself and tell the audience what you're doing.
Hi, thank you. Thanks for having me. I'm a solution architect working in the UK, focusing on Microsoft Azure predominantly. Do lots of AVD, lots of infrastructure as code, and I've been moving more into Azure Local as well. So yeah, really glad to be here, and hopefully what I'm going to talk about will be useful.
Cool. And what's the topic you brought with you?
So the topic I've brought with me is all about how I've been my method, if you like, for developing custom images in Azure and then copying those down to Azure Local. And it's come about because of a few different ways I've worked previously, things I've seen needed for AVD, for example. So yeah, just sharing a method really that may be of interest to others with a similar need.
Sounds great. So looking forward to this session. But before we start, I would like to invite all of you to our Azure Local Tech Talk community. So Azure Local Tech Talk, for those who do not know what it is a community of people that are interested in Azure Local. So these are people at Microsoft, at partner side, customer side, and on LinkedIn, there is a group called Azure Local Tech Talk. And if you go there, you will find a lot of helpful content about news, about tools, about readiness offerings. So if you're not already part of that community, I invite you to look for that group, Azure Local Tech Talk, and follow us. So for example, today there has been a post of a community member, Armin. He said that there was a storage spaces direct calculator in the past created by my colleague Cosmos Darwin, and this is no longer available. So he decided to create his own storage spaces direct capacity calculator. And of course, he shared it with everyone. So if you are interested, you can test it and use it. And these are the things we share on our community portal on LinkedIn. So again, if you're not part of that community already, please follow us. And if you have any questions in future, maybe some issues you are facing when you're deploying Azure Local or managing or monitoring it, you can type your question into that group as well. So we try to answer immediately, or sometimes we do not know how to solve the problem, and we ask the community if they have some experience, people like Jake, and they can answer your question through this community. So I think that's a helpful tool for all of us. But now let's go directly to the content Jake brought with him. And let's start our today's session about custom images and Azure Local. So handing over to you, Jake.
Thank you very much. Yeah, so everyone, great to be here. The topic for my presentation today is going to be custom images and Azure Local. So I'm Jake Walsh. I'm a senior solution architect working for CDW UK. You can follow me on X. I'm at JakeWalsh90, and I also do a bit of blogging over at jakewalsh.co.uk. The QR code will take you to my website if that makes it easier to scan as well. Usual disclaimer: views, opinions, my own. Do check documentation. Just to make sure if you're doing anything in your environment. So let's just have a look at the plan. So I'm going to talk about why custom images are important. I think it's really important to understand why would we talk about custom images? What are the benefits? I'm not just talking about something for the sake of it. There's a reason for doing this, and there's I think some quite compelling reasons that custom images can be quite important for our deployment. I'm going to look at the process I've used for building images and how that integrates to the compute gallery. That's a really important part of this process. I'm going to look at the process for existing images. So what I've done here is take a process that I've used previously in Azure and I've extended it to Azure Local. And I think it's worth calling out. This process is just one of many ways. I'm sure you could achieve the same thing with different methods. So this is just one option you could use. But I think it's really important to understand that existing process, and then we can move into how we'd actually use those custom images, how we'd extend that process to Azure Local. And then if there's any questions that pop up in the chat, I'll do my best to answer them, and I'll leave you with a few links to read at the end. So, why are custom images important? What do we gain by using custom images with Azure Local? Why would we not just spin everything up? I need to build a server, I need to build a VM to host this workload, whatever that may be. Why would I use a custom image to do that? And for me, there are lots and lots of reasons, but I think it boils down to kind of these key five. So from an infrastructure as code perspective, I've used Packer, which I'll show you in a second, to build my image. And by using infrastructure as code, we're defining that image once, and we're then able to deploy it many times, be it across Azure in public cloud regions or across Azure Local. We have all of the benefits of operating in a DevOps methodology. That image deployment can become part of our existing processes and tooling. We may have pipelines we've written that go off and do certain deployments for us, that go off and build certain infrastructures, that do other things, and we can integrate that, that image build to part of that process. And it also means if we're working with existing images, this is something I've done quite a lot myself, but built images to be used for AVD, for example, in Azure, and actually taking those existing images, those processes that we've made, we've spent time getting right, we've made sure they're right for our business or our use case, whatever it may be, and actually then extending those to Azure Local. That's a huge benefit. We're cutting out some repetition there and just taking something we know is good, we know it works how we need to, we're happy with the process, and then extending that to the local. And there's also standardization. That's a huge benefit. So as we define those custom images using infrastructure as code, using DevOps, perhaps using an existing image, those templates and definitions can become standardized. So we're not doing one thing in public cloud and a different thing on Azure Local, for example. There's also the repeatability aspect. So, multiple deployments using the same image, that's going to be really key if you're a large organization that has multiple deployments, different clusters, different locations, whatever it may be. And actually being able to do something in a repeatable fashion in the same way is really key to that scale in business. And, if you've worked with custom images in Azure, that's something that, you'll be very, very familiar with. I'd like to address a question as well at the beginning, because when I talked about this process to some of my colleagues, they sort of, they responded with, well, why would you do this in a public cloud region and then in fact copy that image down to Azure Local? Why would you not just run this process on your Azure Local deployment? What's the benefit of doing that? And it's a perfectly valid question, and it's a really, really good point. And I think the only way I can address that question is to say, if you are only working with Azure Local, actually doing this locally probably is the right choice. And actually, the method I'm going to show you probably wouldn't be the right choice. It's very, very much dependent on the scenario that you are trying to address, the use case you're trying to meet. And if you aren't working with deployments in a public region, actually this might not be the right choice. But I still think there are some benefits to doing it in this way, and hopefully those will come through in the process that I outline. So just before we get started, it's important just to talk about how we actually build the customized images. Now, I've chosen to build them in Packer. It's something I'm very familiar with. I've used Packer in on-premises environments. I've used Packer to build images in Azure for machines, for desktops, for AVD. And I just want to spend a couple of minutes just showing you this template, essentially, just to give you the background on how it's been used and show you a couple of customizations I've made to this template, which when you see the process completed at the end, and I'll storyboard the process and go through that step by step, you'll see why that's important, because you'll see where those customizations have taken effect. So I'll just stop my screen, and I'm just going to switch over to VS Code. Let me just do that now. Okay, so this is sharing my VS Code window. I am just going to I'll just view that and zoom that in a little bit more. so it shows up nicely on the video. So what I have here is a Packer template, and this Packer template builds a 24H2 Windows 11 deployment. Gives us a machine image we can use. You'll notice a few different things about this template. So I have client ID, secret subscription. That's the method I've used to authenticate. I will give you a link to this template at the end of the session as well. So if you want to go and try this process, you don't have to build this template manually. It's readily available in my GitHub for you to download. And what this template actually does is it allows Packer to go to the Azure public cloud platform and build me an image. And what it will do is it will put this in a certain subscription, as you can see here. It'll place it in a resource group. It'll put it in a gallery I've defined. It'll choose where that image is replicated to, the storage account type, and it'll do things like tags as well. And this is kind of the baseline configuration that you have to have for Packer to build that image for you. So, if you've built images in Azure with other methods that use IAC, you'll be familiar with, finding the OS type, the publisher, the offer, and the SKU, and that sort of stuff. Interestingly, I then have some provisioners. So within these provisioners, there's only really one aspect I'm keen to just draw your attention to here, and I'm actually using Chocolatey. I'm just downloading the community version of Chocolatey, and I'm just doing an install of 7-zip and FSLogix. And that's purely so that at the end of this process, I can demonstrate, having logged into that custom built machine, we can see that 7-zip and FSLogix are installed upon it, just to demonstrate that process has completed. And in the case of what I've done here, you probably would be doing a little bit more than this if this was a deployment in your organization. Perhaps you'd have some custom applications to go onto it, some custom files it would download. But obviously this, just demonstrates that part of the process. So as I say, I just wanted to spend a couple of moments on this just to show you this template, but I will share a link to that at the end. So if you want to go and try this, you've got a ready-made template that's good to go. So I'll just switch back to my PowerPoint now. So let's look at that template, and what that template actually gives us once we've run that process is an image that's stored somewhere. And a moment ago, I went through that shared image gallery destination section of the template, and you'll see here I've defined a gallery that I would store that image to. What that actually means is once that build process has been completed, that image is stored in a gallery up in the public cloud region of our choosing. So here, I've placed it in a resource group. I've asked it to replicate that image to UK South, Azure region, and I've just chosen a standard LRS storage account type. Now, this is an important aspect because now I've built that image. This image is not on Azure local. This is stored in an Azure public region. So I could go and have that image replicated somewhere else. Now, I'll come on to why that's important in a second. But what this does mean is that whole build process can be run in a public Azure region rather than having to be run on Azure local. And once we've done that, what we actually have here is an image that's created, and you'll see here the Windows 11 24H2 AVD image. That's been built. It's now ready to be used across Azure public regions. And if I wanted to use this to build out, an AVD host pool in a public cloud region, I could do that. I could go straight into, AVD. I could choose my custom image, and I could deploy that. That would be the process there. I also have options for replication. So you'll see, I could choose to replicate it somewhere else. And that's very useful for organizations that have, multi-geo aspects. Perhaps you're a business that operates in several different countries, in different locations, or you might need to have it replicated for DR purposes or something like that. So again, this is another benefit that this method brings us. Mm-hmm. I said I would mention geography. So let's talk geography. So if we have a single compute gallery, what we can actually do is then replicate that image into locations close to our Azure local regions. So, those images can then be stored locally to where our deployments might be. And I've used a sort of simplified, globe icon here just to show that. But actually what that means is if we have multiple deployments, we can actually start to put that content in galleries and replicated locations that are close to where we need to do that deployment. So again, using the public cloud aspect to build and to store those images is giving us that ability to service those different geographies. And all of that being done in the public cloud aspect means we don't need to consider things like these could be, for example, completely isolated deployments that don't have network line of sight, but we're using that Azure public cloud region and the various geographies that we replicate or copy images to actually provide those images to these different regions. So it's solving that geography challenge from an image perspective for us. There are also some additional configuration options available. So, we can give an end of life date. We can lock deletion from replicated locations. We might have a test version of this image. I might be testing a version 1.01, and I want to exclude it from the latest version so that somebody doesn't go and accidentally deploy that whilst I'm still in the test process. So again, there are a few additional options that using that compute gallery enables us to have. So I've drawn out a bit of a diagram here, really, that just outlines the process. So what we've looked at so far is the use of something like the Azure Image Builder or Packer to build an image and store that in a compute gallery as an image definition. And you'll see the area outlined in blue. That's all of that would happen in a public Azure region. And by doing that process, so via the Image Builder or Packer, we can put that image in a compute gallery, and then we can build a VM, in the Azure public cloud from that image. That's a very straightforward process. We would go to build the VM, be it a standard virtual machine, be it AVD, whatever it may be. We can choose that image and we can go off and build that process. What we need to consider, though, is how this would change if we'd like to use these with Azure Local. And that process, in effect, expands somewhat. So we need to follow a number of steps. I'm just going to go through these steps sort of step by step here, just to give you an idea of what that process looks like, give you a sort of an understanding of the various steps that we need to go through. And hopefully that will then really highlight the fact that by starting this in a public cloud region and then extending it to Azure Local, it's giving us that kind of best of both worlds aspect. So as I said, these are the additional steps for Azure Local. We're familiar with the steps that would need to happen in a public cloud region, but we do need to consider these 4 additional steps to get that image to one of our Azure Local deployments. So if we were to do this in a whole, there's really no reason why we couldn't look at this as a whole process. We could start that process, as I said, in a public cloud region and have VMs both in the public cloud and on Azure Local deployed by the same image we've used. So they don't have to be a completely separate operation. We can bring that all together. We can have one process for building those images, and we can use those across both of the different platforms in question here. So when we look at those additional steps for Azure Local, I talked about 4 steps, and these are the 4 things that we need to consider. So number 1 is we need to actually create a disk from that image definition in the compute gallery. We then need to think about copying that disk to a storage account. That's so it allows us to import that to Azure Local. Obviously, you'll be familiar that there are only certain places you can import those images and disks to. We then need to actually copy that to Azure Local. Unless it's on our local deployment, we can't deploy a VM for it. And then we need to actually create that virtual machine on our Azure Local deployment just to prove that that process is working end to end. So actually, creating that disk, how do we go about doing that? So to do this, we're solving, something that we need to get over to be able to copy that disk over. So at the time of writing, at the time of presentation, when putting this together, there's actually only 3 locations you can add VM images to Azure Local via, the native experience in the portal. One is from the marketplace, one is from a local share. I just want to touch on that local share piece, actually, because that comes back to the question I asked at the beginning. If you were working purely on Azure Local here and had no public cloud requirement, actually building that locally might be the right choice, and then you could import that from a local share. But what we're going to do here is we're going to use that from an Azure storage account, because I want to have this process where I can build an image once in the public region, and I can use it in the public region, I can use it on Azure Local, and have that best of both worlds scenario. So we need to convert our image in a compute gallery. It needs to be converted from an image to a disk in a storage account. And that's really important. That allows us to do that import to the Azure Local deployment. So that's
Jake,
with
do
a
you
CLI
have
script.
sorry to interrupt you. Do you have customers using Azure Local but not Azure?
I have not experienced that myself. It's an interesting, I suppose some customers may be looking at that Azure Local deployment who haven't perhaps put infrastructure in Azure yet, or are consuming PaaS services or something like that. So some of these concepts may still be fairly new, I suppose.
Okay.
It's Azure CLI to the rescue here, as I've called it. We can actually create an unattached disk from our compute gallery, and this is a simple CLI command. Obviously, I'm not going to read the whole command, but it's just a case of defining that source image. So you'll see here it's that version 1 of the image I have, and then just doing an AZ disk create. And what that will do is give me an unattached disk that I can then copy to a storage account and utilize on my Azure local deployment. And once that completes, we have a disk. Here's one I created earlier, just in my test environment, and obviously I have an unattached disk, as you'll see there in the middle, created from that image that was saved in that compute gallery. And that's just a step we need to have in place so that that's now ready to be put into a storage account and then copied down to our local our Azure local deployment. You could take this disk, manually copy that to your Azure local deployment if you wanted, and then do the import from a local share, for example. So yeah, this is kind of one of those scenarios where there's multiple different ways to achieve the same outcome, but hopefully this is just providing some context about the method I've used in this case. What we actually need to do next is use a script to copy that disk to a storage account. And this is quite a large script. I'm not going to go through this line by line, but it's definitely something if you're going to run this in your environment, you'll want to take a look at and provide all of the required parameters that suit your specific environment. That QR code will take you to a link just to give you the script. And I'll just move on to one more slide just to show that. So the actual script itself does a number of things. So you have to provide a number of parameters. I'm sure that will come as no surprise. What you need to do is provide the subscription, the resource group, the disk name. There's also some information about the shared access signature. So that's really important so that it can access all of the storage accounts. You need to give it things like the storage account name, the container name, the key, destination file name, things like that. Various other parameters that need to be run. Once you've configured that script, and I would recommend just taking a little bit of time to make sure this is set up correctly for your environment, and obviously test this away from production first, as you would do with anything. Once that's been run, that will then run a copy process that will copy that disk into a storage account for you. And once that has been done, we then have a disk inside. You'll see here it's just in a container, and that disk is then ready for us to do that import process. Likewise, at this point, you have a VHD. If you wanted to download that and place it on a local share, you could do the import in that way as well. And I know I keep coming back to that point about the question of why would you do it in this way, but what I'm just trying to show is the public cloud aspect. So that's sort of building images in public and using them on local as well, giving you that sort of best of all worlds option. At that point, it's the normal process. So I can go off and create an image. I just need to give it the required information. You'll see here I just placed that image to download is my image in the storage account. I've given it a name just called test-packer. Testing my packer configuration that I built, which was the JSON file that I went through at the beginning. And that process then obviously runs through the basics, the tags, and runs through the validation. And once that's completed and downloaded, that image will be downloaded from our storage account, and we can then go ahead and create a virtual machine on Azure Local as a result. So, whilst there are a couple of copy operations here and a few scripts we need to run, the 2 scripts we need to run just to move that disk from compute gallery to, that image from compute gallery to disk and then into a storage account. We now have a process here where an image built in the public region can be used in both the public region and on Azure Local. So we're bringing that process all together. And once we have that image done, you'll see here that just grabbed a screenshot whilst it was downloading, but that download will happen from the storage account. And that storage account might be something that's available, in a specific region. It might be to a specific project you're working on. But again, once we have that in a storage account, we can copy that to different locations. We could download that to multiple deployments of Azure Local. So it's giving us lots of different options. We potentially could be in a scenario where, as a business, we have Azure Local deployed in 20 different sites that don't have network communication. And actually having that image that we need to deploy for our application up in the public region and then downloaded to all of those deployments means we can go and do that deployment from that same image, having only built the image once. And once that's done, you have an image on Azure Local. It's been built, it's ready to go, and we can actually start doing some testing. That download process will depend on the speed of the connection, obviously. How fast your Azure Local deployment will be able to download that image. But once it's done, you'll have an image that's an Azure Local gallery image ready for you to use. And really, it's just testing at that point. So I'm just coming back to the Packer template I showed at the beginning, and I know I laboured the point a little bit about installing 7-zip and FSLogix, but when I actually logged in and tested it, you can see here both 7-zip and FSLogix are installed. So that template that we started with at the beginning has been run in Packer. It's built me an image in a gallery in Azure. It's then been copied from that, so created a disk from it. That disk has then been placed in a storage account. We've then used the normal process to copy that VHD down to Azure Local from that storage account. And now we've got a VM that's been deployed on it. So we've shown that process end to end, and hopefully that just gives an idea of how a process that's perhaps already in use in your organization for public cloud image building can actually just be extended with a few small steps to also include Azure Local as well. So we've confirmed we have a successful image deployment. That's really all there is to it. Happy to cover off any questions anyone's posted, anything like that. And I will just leave you with a few additional links for wider reading. Really, it's not a particularly complex process, but hopefully, if you are working in an environment where you're building images in public cloud and you need to continue doing that, you now have a clear route to be able to extend that process through to Azure Local as well.
Yeah, so at the moment there are no open questions in the chat. So I think it's because Easter vacation time. So we do not have so many live attendees. But if you're watching this session on demand the next couple of days or weeks, of course, you can type your questions on the YouTube channel and we try to answer them as soon as possible via the comments section in YouTube.
Yeah, no, sounds good, and I'm happy to be contacted if people have questions. I can't promise I have all the answers, but I will definitely do my best. So, quick recap, really. We've covered off, why those custom images are important, the types of customer that they would, and the types of environment they would be useful for. We've looked at how we build those images. We've looked at the template file. We've looked at the process. We've also looked at, how perhaps a process that's already building images can be extended with a few small steps for Azure Local, and looked at how we actually use those with Azure Local as well. I just have one more screen that I'll leave up. Apologies, it's just a few links, but this is the guidance I've followed. They're not the easiest of links, but I have put these on my blog as well, and a link to the template there. So if you want to follow this process, I have written it up on my blog, but also you can download the template, and there's some links to the the different guidance on Microsoft Learn there as well. So yeah, I hope this has been useful, and thank you for your time.
Yeah, maybe we can post these links to the YouTube channel directly, so it's easier to click them. And as there are no open questions and we are close to weekend, I would like to say thank you very much, Jake, for your time and sharing your knowledge. Lee Harrison is thanking you and me as well. So I have not done a lot, but you have done all the things. So all the thanks goes to you directly. And I would like to wish all of us a nice weekend. And hopefully we will see us very soon at Azure Local Tech Talk. But for today, we are at the end of the session and we would like to say goodbye.